everyone. It is Wednesday, July 6th, 2022. Let me ask, is there anything going on? Or is it a slow news day? What's happening? I mean, it is an avalanche of news, of some tragedy, of some terror. On July 4th, when we thought we were having a wonderful celebration of our nation's founding, fireworks went off and people ran for their lives thinking it was gunshots. There were gunshots in Highland Park, Illinois, in other areas around the country, in Philadelphia. We have mass shootings. We have a Supreme Court running out of control for many of us with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, decisions on guns, decisions on religious freedom, decisions on doing away with a lot of the protections in the Environmental Protection Agency for climate change, things that are urgent and need to happen. And I have two people here with me today who are energized and who are up in, I don't want to use the word up in arms, two people who are excited to make the changes needed to put our country back on track. Are we ever going to get back on track? So I need to talk to people about it. Today, we have someone from West Virginia. It's interesting to know what other states are doing. And she is Margaret Chapman-Pomponio. And Margaret is the CEO of WV West Virginia Free. It's the agency that supports reproductive rights in West Virginia. Hi, Margaret. It's great to have you on the show today.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. And just to introduce her, we'll hear from her also on our local level in Colchester. We have wonderful Mary Bailone, who is the former first selectman of the town of Colchester and now is fired up. And again, we can't use that word. We can't say fired up. We can't say on, right? What word can we use to say, Mary, about how energized you are to make a difference and move us forward? What word?
I'm just saying I'm taking anger, turning it into action. That's what I'm saying.
That's it. And we're going to get to you on the local level. But let's talk about Roe, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Margaret, it was a slow evolution in many ways. Many of us who pay attention to the Supreme Court knew that it might be slipping away. Talk about that. We've had some warnings over the past few years. Talk about that.
Yeah, I have been working with West Virginia Free for a number of years. West Virginia Free is a reproductive health, rights, and justice nonprofit, like you mentioned. And so that means that we do policy advocacy, and we also do a lot of education, voter mobilization. We work with doctors and lawyers and the general public to try to protect and promote reproductive rights and justice at the state level. We also have a lot of national partnerships, and all of this is sort of coming together in this moment now that Roe has fallen. And we have seen West Virginia old draconian code go back into effect from the 19th century that creates the crime of abortion. And so as of right now, there's a lawsuit has been filed for an injunction so that Women's Health Center, our state's only remaining abortion clinic, could pick back up providing care, because right now, after Roe fell, they did stop because they were concerned about, being prosecuted. And I can tell you a whole lot about the laws that we do have in West Virginia, how they have ramped up in recent years, and that kind of goes to your question more. West Virginia, this surprises a lot of people, but we had been a blue state until 2014, and Republicans and conservatives really started to pick up steam. Theretofore, West Virginia actually we were one of 17 states that had Medicaid funding for abortion. That always surprises people. We also had a B rating from NARAL, and And then as soon as conservatives took control of the state house, we just saw increasingly restrictive abortion bills going through. So we're focused on just like my my fellow guest here. We're focused on getting out the vote, and always have been. You know, we also recognize we've got Joe Manchin representing us, and people are interested in Manchin for good reason. So
Yeah.
you're doing lots of texting. We're going to be canvassing, and I've never seen people so fired up. Or
So, yeah.
energized, mobilized.
Yeah, no, you get my point about that. We have to be careful with our language. So let's unpack that a little bit. Oh God, I don't think that's a good word either. Let's go back and talk about the components of Roe versus Wade and why it is a decision that can bode ill for much more than just reproductive rights because of the legal underpinnings. Can you give us in some lay language just what Roe said, why Alito and the others on the court decided it was incorrectly decided, and what legal reasoning now can threaten other rights that the court has granted in many decisions over the years since Roe versus Wade?
Yeah, I mean, Alito and those that agreed with him, obviously they take a very conservative and originalist view of the Constitution. You know, Alito said abortion is not mentioned in the Constitution. Well, women aren't really mentioned either. You know, and so we saw this coming. We knew when Trump got so many of his appointees on the bench, we were deeply concerned, and certainly in December when oral arguments were held at the Supreme Court on this case, we could tell by the questioning that was reported in the media that it didn't seem to be going in our favor. And this is about power and control. You know, it is about controlling people who can get pregnant, and we are just not willing to compromise on our autonomy and our dignity and our health and freedom.
Right. Well, there are limitations even in Roe versus Wade, right? As soon as the fetus is viable, then there are competing values that a woman has to be concerned about. But the court is stripping all of that away, right, and making it just a complete decision against a woman's right to have the control over her own body. Talk about the comparison of the different states. So we are a quilt work of 50 individual states, many of them which, like West Virginia, which we would consider red, many of them who have already, through their trigger laws, made abortion illegal in their states. Some of them are thinking about making contraception illegal. They are creating criminal penalties for people who get involved with supporting people who have abortions. And then you have states like Connecticut, which has codified into law already all of the provisions of Roe versus Wade and all of the rights. And states like New York, which are saying we're going to be a sanctuary state. We're going to welcome people from the red states and those states that have outlawed abortion to come here. Tell us about the intricacies, the day-to-day practicalities of what's going to happen through the courts and through just the passage back and forth between people and ideas from one state to the next. Isn't that going to be pretty much of a mess?
It is. And, you know, no matter your zip code, you really ought to be able to have control over your body and your freedom and decisions that affect your life and family and future. And yeah, West Virginia is in a tricky spot, but I will say it's tricky. It's a dangerous spot. I will say that you can't really, and maybe you know this from talking to my friend Andrew Schneider, who works on LGBTQ civil rights in West Virginia. But West Virginians, get a bad rap. There are a lot of stereotypes about us. But we also, even after conservatives took control of the legislature here, they have passed a number of bills increasing access to birth control. And I thought of that because you mentioned it. We were one of few states that has basically put birth control over the counter. That hasn't been implemented quite yet, and it's not really over the counter because that's an FDA issue, but you can go straight to the pharmacy without going to the doctor to get birth control in West Virginia. And now we need them to hurry up and get that implemented. It's been stalled out because of COVID and pharmacies are, at capacity. And we have done polling on the issue of abortion access, and I'd love to share with you some links on the polling that we've done. And the majority of West Virginians don't want to see the government interfering in private healthcare decisions. And you'll see right now what's playing out with this old criminal statute coming back to life is that Republicans are infighting about, what they need to do to address the old criminal statute. And so they're kind of all over the place. Some of them want to go into a special session to address it. Some of them don't. Democrats have called for a special session. We are calling for a special legislative session and a full repeal of the old criminal statute. And we're having a rally on Saturday, and we're working in coalition with a number of organizations and just really trying to tap into the outrage right now and make sure that it's a catalyst for real and meaningful change and for people to be able to have their voices heard. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I might add that Joe Manchin, on the day that Roe fell, came out calling for codification of the principles of Roe. Now, that's a totally political issue in and of itself because there'd have to be at least a carve out for the filibuster. But there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so let's.
Question?
Yes, you did. I want to ask you specifically what are the criminal implications if under the law now in West Virginia? What can happen to you if you support someone who is going to get an abortion? What's the story?
It's so horrific. So anyone involved in administering an abortion, or so either provider or patient, is criminally liable and subject to a minimum of 3 years in prison and a max of 10. And like I said, this was law. So this was law that was created in Virginia before West Virginia was a state. And for those of you that don't know, West Virginia seceded from the South during the Civil War. And so we're talking about a statute that goes that far back. It's that draconian.
So you brought out another interesting point. States like Connecticut can codify or make as state laws all of the provisions in the right to reproductive freedom, the right to abortion, which we have done in Connecticut and other, we may call them blue states, have done. However, the Republicans on the national level, if they should take over the House of Representatives and the Senate next year, they're talking about passing a national law outlawing abortion, which would abrogate all of the state laws that now codify Roe versus Wade. What shall we think about that, Margaret?
Well, that's where we come back with everything right now is on the line, and we need all the support we can get to get people out to vote, and understanding what is at risk, and that it is time to draw the line, because like you've said, and Justice Thomas made clear in his commentary that they're coming for all manner of rights, everywhere from voting to LGBTQ equity, environmental protection, on and on and on. Oh, birth control, of course. And so we really believe that if we connect with voters, that we can mobilize people and beat some of this stuff back. Because I mean, let's be real. I don't care what state you're in. Most people realize that criminalizing abortion has gone way too far, and they're outraged. I have not seen so many young people so engaged as they are right now. I mean, the day that Roe fell, there were vigils across the state, and people just poured out of their homes to the courthouse steps. And young people came with homemade signs. I mean, that was the silver lining for me, and I think many of us that have been doing this work for a long time, to really see so many fresh faces. And there are a lot of people. It's a pretty small state here. We know each other, and I saw a lot of strangers in the crowd when I was at the vigil here on Friday, the 24th. Everything's kind of blended together in one long day, it feels like, since the decision was issued. But anyway, that's part of the silver lining right now. And we just have to keep at it.
Right. Well, it's a silver lining. We've always been counting on the young people to be progressive and to want to help us to move our country forward. But sometimes they don't show up to vote. And I guess that's the main thing, to try to mobilize the people that you're talking about, Margaret, that you've never seen before, who are outraged by this, who can't believe that the state is criminalizing this kind of behavior, right? How do you mobilize them to vote in November? And some states, are they so red that they bleed red that they'll just never change? And is there a chance for Virginia? I mean, if you'd say that there's a chance for Virginia, well, that's the best news I've heard. It means that if Virginia can go blue, then anybody can go blue.
Well, so for West Virginia, we had on the ballot in 2018 a constitutional amendment that said nothing in this Constitution secures or protects the right to abortion or requires the funding of abortion. And that amendment passed by little more than 3 points. And we had a large scale statewide campaign, but we didn't have enough resources to get to everyone. I strongly believe that if we had had more investment earlier on, that we could have easily gotten well over 4 points a margin. And so, however, the reason I bring that up, obviously it's pertinent for the discussion, but also that year in 2018, we did see a little blue wave of state legislators elected. And and so the political motivation on the part of conservatives for getting that on the ballot was off, and they knew that. And they had hoped to use that to gin up their conservative base. Well, it ended up resulting in the defeat of many conservatives in the state legislature. And so I do believe that our time is now to really mobilize the voters, get them educated, let Joe Manchin and Senator Capito see that people are tuned in and demanding that they protect our rights and our health care.
So you mentioned, I know Sheila Capito is a Republican senator from West Virginia, but she's generally known as a more moderate in some ways than some of the others. But you mentioned that Joe Manchin has said he would vote for a passage of a law that codified Roe. On the other hand, as soon as he said that, they asked him, well, will you vote to stop the filibuster, to end the filibuster, or just carve it out for that issue so that the House of Representatives, which will vote for it, and the Senate can vote for it with your vote, with Senator Sinema's vote from Arizona, and then the vice president, who would break the 50-50 tie to 51, and we'd get it as a national law. And he said, no, he's not going to do that. So what do you think is going on? Is he just trying to play both sides so he keeps his conservative base and he makes his Democrats happy? What's going on with Senator Manchin?
Well, if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me that, I would be a rich woman. So all I can really say is that we just have to keep at him. I think that when he sees more voters mobilized, that, you know, it's more likely that he'll be willing to come around and make some of that progress. And so that's where working with progressive groups on the ground here in West Virginia is just so important, so that he sees us and he sees average voters and hears from them.
Right. So really only national legislation or state laws are going to change, because Margaret, realistically, how long will it be before another Supreme Court in the future can overrule this Roe decision? You know, how likely is that? How long will that take? Probably lifetimes, right?
Yeah, it's going to take way too long, and we can't wait that long. You know, we're already in a lurch in West Virginia with no abortion care being offered right now. I mean, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. I have been inundated with people reaching out, you know, doctors saying, what does this mean for miscarriage management? And patients just completely scared about what's going on. So like I've been working with attorneys to get training for OBGYNs, so that they can really properly analyze their legal risk in this moment. You know, doctors are already risk averse, and this kind of ambiguity in the care that they're able to provide, you know, just can't stand. And we've already got maternity care deserts in West Virginia where, you know, people are already having to drive hours to give birth. And so, you know, we have a shortage of OBGYNs, and laws like this are just going to drive providers out of state and literally drive patients out of state.
Okay. Wow. Well, in the few moments that we have left with you, why don't you give us some advice, not just for people in your state, but people around the country? What are the major things that, as citizens, we should be doing to try, and we cannot change this decision, but try to correct it through our own actions and our own laws in our states?
Well, yeah, first I want to thank you so much for having me on. I've really appreciated it. And right now, I think the biggest thing that we must do is turn the outrage, like we've said, into action. You know, it's really not necessarily just enough to vote. We've got to be more engaged right now. And so that means working with organizations like West Virginia Free or the other national orgs or your state level grassroots orgs to figure out what you can do to help educate and mobilize the electorate and demand actual leadership and courage from our elected officials. You know, rallying is important, and we're going to be doing that, like I said, on Saturday, but that's not enough either. So people should get involved in races. They should get involved in a nonpartisan way with, you know, 501c3s and C4s that are doing this voter mobilization, and just do whatever you can to support your abortion providers. There are abortion funds around the country. You know, certainly you can donate to the organizations like West Virginia Free and all of the wonderful national groups that are doing great work. I know you've got a great ACLU affiliate in Connecticut and a great many other organizations as well. So, you know, we've got to beat back apathy, you know, with the feeling of finality with this Supreme Court decision. I know that it's really easy to want to stick our heads in the sand, and there's so many difficult things happening in this country. I mean, this is just one of the terrible things that's going on right now. But that means it's time for us to plug in and work together and support each other. And that's how I move forward, and we've got to move forward with hope.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you for your knowledge and for the work that you're doing. And wvfree.org is the name of your organization, and the website where you can learn more. There it is on the screen. You can learn more about what Margaret is doing. It's important that we try to coordinate with other states, because the Supreme Court has put us in that position where we just have to do that. So thank you again, and all best to you in your work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And now we're going to turn back to Mary Bailone. Mary, before we talk about the other things that you think we need to get energized about, I want to turn to you in your role as a nurse. You are the head of Hartford Health Nursing, and you heard Margaret talk about the tortuous predicaments that gynecologists, abortion providers find themselves in, trying to figure out these new laws, as well as the predicaments that women find themselves in. I want your take on that. What do you have to say about all of that?
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad that, you know, we have a healthcare provider shortage as it is. We have a number of people that, you know, COVID pushed them over the edge to make a decision that this was the time to leave our profession of caring for others. And not because they don't want to care for others, but because they're exhausted and spent and, you know, just at the end. And so you have that happening at the same time that we are putting on additional restrictions, and not just restrictions. I mean, in the healthcare industry, we're a regulated industry. We are used to working within the rules, you know, all kinds of policies and procedures, sometimes made by politicians, sometimes just made by regulatory agencies that you can't make heads or tails of why they did it. But we conform. We do what we need to do to keep our patients safe and to be able to provide them care. This is threatening their livelihood. And not only that, but, you know, the part that scares me, and some things that I saw happen when I was first selectman, is that this normalized deviance that comes out of this type of a mentality, that we can go and we can take action against people because they don't think like us. You know, yeah, some of the more educated people probably aren't going to do that, but it does inspire others to do it. I mean, we saw what happened on January 6th. And, you know, this gives energy to those people who are just angry about anything, and think that, well, it's okay. You know, the Supreme Court said you can't have an abortion. And so I'm just, as a healthcare provider, I'm very worried because I don't want any of my colleagues to feel that they have to risk their life or their license to do what they chose the profession to fulfill for them personally. But I know that there will be those who will, just like they did in the past before this was something that was available to everyone. There were many healthcare providers that put themselves at risk to make sure that women got the safest care to end their pregnancy.
And now, do you think that there will be a group of doctors, gynecologists, other physicians in Connecticut who will be taking in patients from other states who can't get reproductive health care in other states, will come to Connecticut and will accept the liabilities for that? That will be a morass too. What do you think of that?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the dilemma just has to do with, you know, the aftercare. You know, you need to have a professional relationship. I mean, people seek healthcare in other states all the time for all kinds of reasons. So that part I'm not so worried about. I do think it's going to overrun. I mean, if you've seen the map where it's where abortion is still guaranteed by the state, there's not a lot of states. It's slim pickings. And in Northeast, New England happens to have a clump of those states together. So I think it will overrun a system that's already overrun. The impact of COVID and what might come this, this winter with some of the other variations of the virus and monkeypox and whatever else they're throwing our way. I think it's going to make it difficult. I do think that there'll be issues. The other thing that I'm waiting to hear about is, what are insurance companies going to do?
Mm.
Are they going to start to say, we're not going to cover this?
Mhm.
And what type of healthcare will that, even in the states where it's legal, how will that impact people being able to get, if their insurance is X and in their state it's not covered and they come to Connecticut, what's going to happen with that?
Right.
And then what the consequences were before, when there was no access and no insurance to pay for abortion. There were women whose health was compromised, their safety was neglected, and they did not do well.
Yeah, I know it's so not interesting, I guess ironic, that in Justice Alito's decision, he said, "Oh, we're going to take this out of partisanship. We're going to make it very simple. Each state can make its own laws." Well, he created much more partisanship, much more problems, much more interstate. I read that there's going to be lots of interstate legislation, as well as lawsuits between states as to who could do what. I mean, if West Virginia says you can't have an abortion, and will punish people around that, if you go to another state and you're a West Virginia resident, can they still criminalize you? Can they still arrest you for it? I don't know. I mean, these are questions that are unbelievably complicated, that this decision has created. It will be chaos and a lot of lives harmed.
Right.
So
And it's not so long ago, Sheila, that we saw this play out with HIV.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'm from the South Jersey, Philadelphia area. And early in my nursing career is when AIDS became a diagnosed condition. And what we saw is that those areas, and because it was a homosexual disease, basically back then, that's how it was titled, we saw patients flock to areas where they were welcomed, right? So Philadelphia, Center City, Philadelphia, was overrun. The resources were exhausted with people who were HIV positive trying to get appropriate care, because insurances were not paying for it. And there were free clinics and things in, large cities that had, more friendly, gay-friendly opportunities. And so I don't think it's so out of the realm to imagine that things like that could happen as well.
Wow. So, yeah, so that's why I started out thinking about July 4th. Usually we celebrate it. We don't have too many episodes to worry about. We're thinking about the happiness of the founding of our country, the fireworks, the barbecues, the good stuff. And we always thought up until now that America, we have our problems, but we're moving ahead. Each year, each generation, we're giving more and more rights to bring in everyone in our country, whether it's women, whether it's Blacks, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's trans, right? That sense of always moving forward in a positive direction. I think this year, this whole few years with Trump and now the Supreme Court has punctured that feeling of optimism. Do you kind of agree with that?
Well, I'm a very hopeful, optimistic person. So I'm trying to take my anger and turn it into action. I think if there's one cliche saying that's out there that is very true and powerful, it's that this is proof that elections do have consequences. And, it is impacting us in all areas of how we live our lives. It's not just healthcare, and to your point, I mean, okay, this is abortion for women, right? That is this direct impact. But as Margaret was mentioning as well, I mean, where does it stop? Is it, I'm a senior, I'm a woman, I'm a lesbian, I have lots of reasons, I'm a Democrat. I have lots of reasons to be concerned about what happens on November 8th in these midterm elections and how things could completely change. Because, you had mentioned at the beginning, and we've referenced this a couple times, that, okay, Connecticut, we're good. Well, we're good because who is in office right now? That could change. We could become a West Virginia. We could become Tennessee. We could become any one of those states if we don't maintain, our government to be supportive of protecting these rights, whether it's dreamers, whether it's seniors, whether it's African Americans. I mean, where is it going to stop? I think Margaret mentioned, this may just be opening the door to revisiting all those things around people's rights. And that,
Well,
to me, that scares me.
yes, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because you sent out an email to a bunch of people, because this was like an alarm bell that you were ringing. And I want to read a little bit from it because it expresses just really what you just said, only you did this right after the Roe versus Wade decision came out. And you said, fair warning, I am writing a political email. You said, this decision by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade is a wake-up call. Elections have consequences. You just said that. I have seen posts on Facebook that Connecticut women are safe because we have state laws protecting women's rights. Sure, we have them now under Democratic leadership. What if the state goes big letters, red, R-E-D, now in this upcoming election? Question mark, question mark, question mark. What will that mean for these rights? And let's not stop at women's rights. What about the other rights of people, like my ability to be married to my wife? What about the dreamers? The list is long. Every one of us is touched in some way if these rights are threatened, and they are if we don't start standing up, speaking out, and getting involved. Mary, you just said it again, but that's the whole ballgame for you, right? And that's why we need you to tell us. So now that we're fired up with this and we agree with you, and Margaret agrees with you, and she's in West Virginia and we're in Connecticut, that you said could go red, what are we going to do? What do we have to do now between now and November?
Yeah, so many of our elected officials are up for re-election this November 8th. And we need to be building the base now, getting people fired up. I mean, we have seen a lack of turnout by Democrats in the past. We get complacent. I've also seen in my town some of the more reasonable Republicans say, hey, Democrats, what are you doing about this? Because in the past, we often rush to try to fix things and make them right. And yet we don't stand up and really take credit for it. So people see it gets better and they assume that, the bad leader is the one that got it fixed. We have got to find a way to engage people, and it can't be resting on the same group of people over and over again. So, I'm a campaign manager for Chris Rivers, running for state representative for the 48th district. We are working hard to get him elected, Norm Needleman, Joe Courtney. We need all these people to continue to represent us. We cannot lose one seat. I don't even know how I can find the words to talk about. There is no time. There is no time. We must use every minute we have. There's a little bit more than 100 days left till election. Like, imagine that. And so we've got a lot of work before us, and I need everyone engaged, helping to make sure that the right people
Right.
represent your values. That's what we want to know, that when we wake up on November 9th, we can say with a clear conscience, we did everything we could to get people elected that represent the values that we hold true, that means something to us. If we do that and someone else gets elected, well, we'll have done the best we can. But I'm afraid that there's way too many people that are going to wake up the day after election and realize, oh yeah, I knew I was going to be out of town, but I didn't bother getting an absentee ballot, or I could have made a few phone calls to my friends and told them how important it is. I voted, but I didn't do anything to get anybody else to vote. I'm not going to be one of those people, Sheila. I guarantee you, I will wake up on November 9th and I will say I exhausted every opportunity to make sure those people elected represent my values.
Yeah.
My family's counting.
So a couple of interesting points. So some people in Connecticut think, well, as you said, we could go red. We think we're blue. We've got 5 blue Congress people in our 5 districts. We have 2 blue senators. We have a legislature of senators and representatives in Hartford that are mostly blue majority. We think we're pretty good, but you're right. I spoke to our Congressman, Courtney. He's now a target of the Republican money machine to get rid of him. I always think of him as a, quote, safe seat. And he wants me to know that he's not safe. We've got to work extra hard. And what about, Mary, the fact that in a national election, maybe 75% of the people on a good day vote for president, of those who are registered? How about the millions of people who don't even register, not to mention the much lower rate of people voting on the interim years, on the, like this coming November, when we're just voting for our governors, our senators, and our representatives? How do we engage the people that have never even registered to vote because they don't think that their voice matters and it doesn't concern them?
Right. Well, I mean, and you bring up about, voting and registration. Look at some of the red states, what's happened to access for people to be registered, to be able to use their voice, people who want to be engaged and want to be able to cast their vote. And things in those red states have been done to prevent them, to deter them. So, I mean, it's all possible. I mean, what are we doing? I'm just trying to step forward and be vocal. I'm not bashing anybody. I mean, I think there are good people on both sides. I think there are crazy people on both sides. But I think that we need to at least make sure that we get out there, we understand the candidates. If we find those that we do believe in, that we are sharing that information with our neighbors, our friends, our family. We're encouraging people to get educated on these candidates and get out there and vote those that represent what is important to them. That, to me, that is what America is supposed to be like, right? And the extremes are concerning to me on both sides. I'm a little bit more of a centralist, but I definitely align with the Democratic Party when I hold the values next to each other. I'm way more Democrat than I am Republican. I'm pro-gun, but I'm not pro AK-47. So I think that we need to stop pigeonholing people and give them a chance to tell us what's important to them and how are they going to represent us, because that's actually what our politicians are supposed to be doing, representing the people who elect them,
Right.
not their own personal.
Well, Mary, most of the national polls say that by 60, 70, 80% of the vote in a poll, people are for more gun regulations, are for keeping Roe versus Wade, are for voting rights laws, and that so many of the hot button issues that we seem to be not being able to go forward on are things that the majority of Americans want, but they're not voting in high enough numbers, and it's not coming through. So when we have a government and a Supreme Court that doesn't represent the will of the people, we're really in trouble. The Supreme Court decisions,
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. It's not about people not thinking these things should be in place. It's they don't show up to exercise their voice. And that is just baffling to me. It's baffling to me. I've never understood it my entire life. So, what we're doing is we're using some tactics that have been used by other people. We're instilling some fear. Is there something you want that if it was gone, you'd be unhappy? Well, guess what? There are people out there looking to take it away from you. And so if that's what it's going to take, then I'm willing to spread that message.
Yeah. Well,
not mistruths, but Roe versus Wade is real. That is real. And so we don't have to make it up. It's not alternative facts. It's real.
Yeah. Well, you talk about even in our own community, the role of the Democratic Party and the Republicans. That I think for many years, I never thought that partisan elections on the local level were that crucial, and that Democrats and Republicans usually work together fairly well on the local issues. I know Republicans in Colchester who vote Democrat on the national and state level and so forth. But I think there's been a change. I'm calling it the Trumpification of Colchester. It swept out all of our good Democrats. And I think that the Republicans that are reasonable and what we call more moderate, they have been ostracized by their party, haven't they? they have not had the power anymore. And we'll talk about in another program the local issues, the library issue that's come up, and other things about the current government that we have in Colchester that doesn't represent what we would like our values to be in a community. But let's talk about what you're gonna do now. Let's go through each race and tell us what you can do to help. So you mentioned our Chris Rivers, running for the state representative in the 48th district. How many people know that Colchester is part of the 48th district, or even know what that means?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we were redistrict our area. We did lose a couple of the blue towns. So the 48th district represents all of Colchester now, all of Franklin, all of Basra, and about 60% of Lebanon. So that's now the 48th district. Well, not now today, but it will be in January when the seats change. Brian Smith, who's currently in it, represents Wyndham and Mansfield, and not all of Colchester, as a matter of fact. So what we're trying to do in that race is Chris has been out door knocking for well over a month now. We are trying to, arrange for some meet and greets. Some of the territory is not easy to walk. We have a lot of farms. We're blessed with a lot of farms and open space in our area, which makes canvassing difficult. So we're working to try to find some other ways to get involved. We've got volunteers. I'm going to pick up postcards tomorrow. We're going to be targeting some specific groups with some postcard writing. And then we'll begin phone calls. Some people say, oh, well, it's only July. It's the beginning of July. Then election's not till November. As I said earlier, we don't have any time to waste. As far as Norm and Norm Needleman goes, we certainly have always been very supportive of Norm, and we'll be campaigning and are campaigning for him as we're door knocking. Some of our district is Kathy Austin, who's a state senator. So we are supporting her as well. And then, of course, I mean, gosh, who in Eastern Connecticut doesn't love Joe Courtney? The guy has just produced for Eastern Connecticut in a way that cannot be compared to any other person. I mean, seriously, the jobs that he has created, the revenue that he has kept in the state that goes to the towns, how he has fought for us in Washington. He has many, many followers. He is being challenged, definitely, but he has many, many followers. So you're probably going to see us open up a campaign headquarters for those three candidates in Colchester, which is exciting. So we're looking for volunteers, people who want to door knock, write postcards, make phone calls, just support, be in the office and answer questions when people come, help us put out signs, things like that. There's jobs for everyone. So if you don't feel like you want to be on the forefront, you're afraid to talk to somebody at the door or whatever, we've got jobs for people. But what we need is for those people to, connect with us and let us know. And I'll give you my cell phone number. It's 860-908-2909. Or you can just go out to our website, which is chrisrivers.com. Send us contact information. We're happy to get you connected. We've got a job for you. Trust me.
All right. So you left out of all those, this governor and lieutenant governor and the other, which is very important. We don't want a Republican legislature passing bills. We don't want a Republican governor that will veto bills that a Democratic House of Representatives and Senate pass, right? So what about Lamont and Lieutenant Governor Bisowitz?
Yes, definitely. Well, and I can tell you that they've both been down here in this area quite a bit, even when it wasn't a campaign season, and paid Susan, especially Susan Bisowitz, the Lieutenant Governor. She comes from a farming background. She's given a lot of attention to our farms here in Colchester. I'm speaking from my perspective when I was the first selectman, because I toured a lot with her. I toured a number of businesses with Governor Lamont. And so we're certainly looking to get them reelected. There is a primary for Secretary of State, but Stephanie Thompson
and treasurer. Oh, that's
great.
That's
treasurer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
those are in August. But so let me ask you this: will it be a completely unified campaign from the governor and lieutenant governor and Senator Blumenthal all the way through? I think maybe wouldn't it be nice if some people who don't know what 48th means to have an informational brochure that gives the whole ticket from top to bottom and the importance of voting Democratic for November?
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I mean, it basically, yes, we want you to vote row A. We want you to vote straight across, because if we don't have the majority, we've seen what happens. You can have a Democrat at the head, but if they don't have the support from the people who send the bills up to be signed, it's for nothing, right? They stonewall things. Look at the Supreme Court justice never even got interviewed because, they didn't have the majority. So we don't want to lose that. We worked really hard to get it. I've seen what's happened in the town of Colchester, where we had won 14 out of 14 seats in 2019, and in 2021 we won like 3 seats. It completely changed hands, and that has made we don't have a budget in our town, and I mean, we're struggling. We're really struggling.
Right. So in addition to the information about these are the seats that we're voting on, you're a citizen of this district. We need to talk about what the issues are, because we know that the Republicans only want to talk about inflation, which is a legitimate issue. It is important, but they don't want to talk about all the other issues that you and I are talking about today, and we're talking about with Margaret, right? So we have to put it all in good perspective for them. So that's another very important thing, because when you talk to a Republican, oh, but Biden and inflation, oh, but gas prices. Well, we know that there's so much else that's at stake, and that Biden is only one cog in the wheel of what creates global inflation. And right, that's very, very important.
Yeah, and not for nothing, but you had me on when I was first selected, when we talked a lot about COVID, and we certainly were not getting the support from the President of the United States to help to slow the spread of that disease. And we had a lot of pushback from Republicans saying it was all made up. It was a made up thing to scare people. And a lot of the issues related to the costs are directly related to the impact of COVID on our industries. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think it should be Biden's picture, that sticker that they're sticking on the gas pumps.
No, but it is, and we have to disabuse people of that. We have to set it straight and do it in a way that is good sound bites, which we're not always very good at. Taking a complicated issue, but put it into a nice sound bite that people can grab onto and know. So the other last thing I wanted to mention before we get back to the final things we can do is, you hear people in the blue states say, well, I live in Connecticut. I live in Massachusetts. I'm safe. We're safe. I don't have to work hard here because my blue guys, they're all going to win. So I'm going to Missouri. I'm going to Georgia. I'm going to Arizona. I'm going to the battleground states where I'm going to really spend time. I'm going to live there for 2 months because I want to make sure that the Democrat gets elected in those contested things. We can do that, but you have to concentrate on Connecticut also, right? Well, mostly, number one.
Yes, but I mean, I will say that, if there are people that have the ability to travel out of state to go support a campaign in some key places, we certainly want to encourage them to do that, because those seats are important too, right? But yeah, we would like to see more people get involved in our local area in the state of Connecticut, engage and be active. In some way, even if it's just call one other person and say, I need you to vote. I want to tell you who I'm voting for and why I'm voting for this person, or put a lawn sign out, or something that makes themselves a little bit more visible.
How about any outdoor rallies as we get closer into the fall, into September?
Yeah, I think you're going to see more visible action. I think, there's a lot of lessons learned from the last few campaigns, and not just locally, but throughout the state and the country. And I think Democrats sometimes, as I said earlier, I think we get complacent, and I don't think we can afford to do that now. So we're pulling out all the stops.
Okay. Well, I hope you're right, because the general thinking over history is that the intermediate election, when there's a Democratic president in the White House, is for the other party to pick up a lot of seats. Sometimes it has not happened that way, but
Yeah.
we have to make it not happen that way this time. And maybe, and let's your final thoughts on this, that all of these issues that have come up between the mass shootings and Roe versus Wade and voting rights and January 6th and the threats to our democracy that I think Trumpism is still hanging over us. Do you think that will energize enough of the Democratic base that your work will be made easier these next few months and we have a more positive chance? We should be more optimistic.
I want to say yes. I am concerned to a certain degree, just what I saw so far in trying to get people to step forward. People are still, they're willing to get mouthy on Facebook. Like I've seen a lot more engagement on Facebook in our local community around issues. And I know the players. So these are people that have not commented in the past, and they are coming out and they are out there every day hammering away. Whether or not we can get them off of Facebook and get them to your door or on your phone or writing you a postcard, that's another story.
Well, yeah, and this is something that I think is probably the most, to my mind, the most horrendous thing that Trump has brought to our culture. And that is the fear, the intimidation, and the threats against election workers, against people who want to put themselves out there to run for office, now against librarians, right? This, I think, to me, is almost the worst thing. It degrades our entire culture. And I think Trump has brought this to us in much greater effect than ever before in our country. And that may be why some people are actually afraid. I mean, why should you run for office when your daughter, who's in her sick bed in the bedroom, has a rock thrown through the window by a political opponent who doesn't like your stand on free libraries or whatever? It's outrageous, isn't it?
It is absolutely. And I faced some of that myself here in our community. And, it's no secret. I'm really much more joyful that I did not get reelected. And I'm kind of taking my energies and using them to help get the right people elected moving forward. It's hard to imagine that when you're just trying to do the right thing, that people will attack you. And I kind of expected it, being the person in the political position, but I didn't expect my family, my friends, my supporters, my volunteers, my staff.
It shouldn't happen. And what you just said is a terrible consequence. You just said you were happy you weren't reelected for that reason. That should not be in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. We shouldn't have somebody say, wow, I'm glad I'm not on the chopping block anymore. We shouldn't have. That's not what we should be standing for in our culture. So it's very sad. It really is. So there are qualified, lovely, wonderful people who say, I'm not putting my family and myself through that. And I think the electorate over the years has gotten more cruel. I give Trump a lot of credit for that. More cruel, more loving of the nastiness of politics, the insults, and less knowledgeable about the issues in many ways, And this is what we have to fight. And I'm glad you're in the arena to do that. But I say it is sad that you would say you're happy you're not in that particular.
Don't worry, we're going to have a great candidate to run next year. And we're going to work our butts off to make sure that we have the best leaders get elected to represent our town, our communities.
All right. So final thoughts. Give us the website. Give us your phone number. Tell us what to do, what to look forward to.
Sure.
In the next few weeks.
So I am leading the Chris Rivers campaign, and my phone number is 860-908-2909. And Chris's website, which has a lot of really great information about him, is chrisrivers.com. Chris will call you personally. He'll meet and have coffee with you. He's been doing that. His platform issues really come around public safety, around education, around preserving open and farming space. And I just forgot what the fourth one was.
Is that the correct number for you? 860 908-2909.
That's it. That's it. That's my
Okay,
personal.
all right, we'll say it again. And you don't
Yeah.
mind people calling and
Absolutely.
talking about
Nope.
that?
No, I know how to
Okay.
screen my calls. I can hang up if
Okay.
you get up.
All right, excellent. All right, so you're for Chris and for Senator Needleman, Governor
Kathy Austin.
Lamont,
Yep, the whole
Kathy
crew.
Austin, okay, and our great Congressman Joe Courtney, who I hope his concern about his district going red is just the normal fear of a politician who always has to be on the lookout and always has to be prepared. But it is a concern. But we're going to take your optimism as the final deal to end this, right?
Great.
We're going to be optimistic. We're going to be proactive, and we're going to really try to get new people out to work these coming months. Okay.
That's the key right there. Thank you.
Right. All right. Thanks, Mary. All right. Talk to you later.
Okay.
See you all next time on Talk Back. Bye.